One silent night, in a village forgotten by time, the air was heavy with secrets. Every shadow seemed to move, whispering things no one was meant to hear. A faint sound called your name, pulling you closer, though your mind screamed to stay away. Something hidden, something long forgotten, waits just beyond the darkness. A promise kept in silence, a truth that has been waiting for years to be revealed. Can you face what lies behind the shadows, without losing yourself? The wind pressed softly against his back. As Arun stepped onto the narrow wooden bridge, the planks groaned under his feet. As if they recognized him. As if they remembered something he wished they did not. A thin mist floated over the river. And the cold air clung to his skin. Like fingers that refused to let go. He slowed his steps. Because the silence around him felt heavier than usual. Like the world was holding its breath. A faint smell of wet leaves rose from the forest beside him. Sharp, earthy, and strangely bitter. Arun lifted his eyes. And the shadows between the trees shifted. As if something had moved. Quietly, watching him. His heartbeat grew louder, thudding through his chest, until it felt brighter than the fading sunlight. He took another step. And a dry whisper drifted through the air. A sound too soft to understand. Yet too clear to ignore. The back of his neck tightened. And he felt a cold pulse run down his spine. As if the whisper had touched him. He turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough to look toward the forest. And something pale flashed between the trunks. Gone too quickly. Yet real enough to freeze his breath. He swallowed. His throat rough and dry. As if the air itself resisted him. The bridge creaked again. Longer this time. Like a warning. Arun forced his foot forward. But the wood felt different. As if a weight he could not see pressed against it. Waiting. Another whisper reached him. Clearer now. Closer. Carrying a voice he had not heard in years. A voice he believed he would never hear again. His fingers trembled. And the mist around his ankles swirled. As if stirred by something that stood beside him. Unseen. Too near. Breathing. The forest fell silent. Completely. Unnaturally. As if every living thing stepped back from him. Then he heard it. A soft step behind him on the bridge. Gentle. Slow. Too deliberate to be the wind. He froze. Because the promise he once made on this very bridge. The promise he broke. Seemed to return to him. With footsteps. With breath. With presence. Another step followed. Heavier. Closer. And the air thickened around his ears. Until he felt. The night was thick and suffocating. Every shadow seemed to stretch unnaturally, reaching for the narrow path where Niran walked. The wind carried a strange scent, earthy and metallic, like soil after a storm, mixed with something faintly sweet that he could not place. He held his breath, feeling the hairs on his arms stand up, as if the air itself was warning him to stop. Each step he took produced a soft crunch against the gravel, echoing louder than it should have in the quiet night. The wooden house ahead stood in darkness, its windows reflecting no light, only black mirrors of emptiness. Niran remembered the promise he had made. A promise that was never spoken, yet heavy on his heart. He reached the creaking gate, his fingers trembling as he pushed it open. It protested with a long groan, as if resenting his intrusion. The garden, once full of blooming jasmine and wild orchids, now lay in shadow, twisted branches brushing against one another in an unnatural rhythm. He felt a chill pass through his chest, though the night was not cold. A sound came from inside the house. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried by the wind. Niran froze, listening. It grew louder, almost a rhythm, a low tapping that echoed inside his skull rather than in the house. He took another step. The wooden floorboards moaned under his weight, each sound amplified in the silent night. Then he saw it. A door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway, black as if it absorbed the light around it. He knew he should not move closer, yet his feet carried him forward as if they had their own will. Inside the room, the shadows twisted and moved. The air smelled of dampness, of decay, yet there was something familiar, something almost comforting. A figure sat in the corner. It did not move, but its presence was undeniable. Niran's heart pounded. The promise he had carried all these years pressed against his chest, a weight heavier than stone. He stepped closer, noticing details in the dim light. The figure was a woman. Her face was hidden beneath a cascade of black hair, yet Niran knew her. He wanted to speak, to break the silence, but the words froze in his throat. Then she lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were hollow, yet they pierced him as if seeing into every secret he had ever kept. A single tear rolled down her cheek, catching the dim light and glowing faintly. Niran could not look away. The tapping noise returned, louder now, a rhythm of something impossible, irregular, and yet purposeful. He realized it was coming from the walls themselves. The shadows shifted around her, almost alive, crawling like smoke across the floor and ceiling. The room grew colder, and Niran could see his breath forming small clouds in front of him. His mind raced. He had never believed in these things, never believed in spirits or curses, yet here, in this suffocating dark, he could feel something ancient watching him. The woman spoke without moving her lips. A sound entered his mind, not his ears, clear and sharp. You broke the promise. Niran's knees shook. He wanted to reply, to explain, yet no sound came out. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing with him, breathing around him. A single candle flickered on the floor, though he had not seen it before. Its light revealed a small box, carved with symbols he did not recognize. The tapping was now a pounding. He bent down slowly, reaching for the box, each movement measured and terrifying. The moment his fingers touched it, the room went silent. Absolute silence. The woman's hollow eyes stared directly at him. He opened the box. Inside lay a small key, blackened with age, yet it felt unnaturally warm to the touch. Then the air shifted. A whisper brushed his ear. Do not open what is sealed. Niran froze. He did not understand, but a part of him knew he had crossed a boundary that should not be crossed. Suddenly, the candle flared, casting long, violent shadows across the walls. The shadows reached for him, twisting like hands made of smoke. The woman's eyes glowed faintly, a soft, red light that made his vision blur. He wanted to run, yet his feet were rooted. The key burned in his hand. The tapping turned into a voice, chanting words that made his stomach churn. The room seemed to stretch, walls bending outward, floors rippling like water. Niran's vision darkened at the edges. He felt his heart rise into his throat. A cold hand brushed his shoulder. He jumped, but there was no one there. The shadows screamed, a sound that should not exist in this world. And then she spoke again, her voice soft but unmistakable. You promised silence. You promised loyalty. Yet here you are, breaking what is not yours to touch. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Niran could hear the pounding of his own heart. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps. And then a whisper, almost tender, yet terrifying, filled the room. Now, Niran felt himself drawn forward, the shadows clutching at his clothes and skin. The key pulsed in his hand, warm and insistent, as if it held a heartbeat of its own. The woman stood before him, her hollow eyes softening, yet still filled with an unspoken warning. He realized that the promise was not about fear. It was about trust. He placed the key gently into her outstretched hand. The shadows recoiled instantly, retreating to the corners of the room. The cold pressure lifted from his chest. The room grew still. The candle, which had long been extinguished, flickered back to life, soft and golden. The woman smiled faintly, a gesture almost human. You honored it, she whispered, voice now calm, almost gentle. Niran's knees shook as he sank to the floor. The air, once heavy and oppressive, now smelled of fresh rain and earth. He looked around. The shadows were gone. The room no longer stretched into endless darkness. Everything appeared normal, yet the sense of having crossed into another world lingered. She stepped closer. This was never punishment, she said. It was a test of silence, of heart, of the courage to keep a promise unseen. Niran nodded, understanding for the first time the weight of what he had carried all these years. She turned toward the window. Moonlight spilled over her figure, soft and serene. I will return to where I belong, she said, voice fading, and you will live with the memory, the silent promise kept. He watched as she walked through the doorway, her form dissolving into the night. The key remained warm in his hand, a reminder, not of fear, but of responsibility. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves outside. Niran breathed deeply. For the first time in years, he felt peace. He knew that silence could be a bond stronger than words. And that some promises, though unseen, could shape a lifetime. He rose slowly, stepping into the moonlit garden. The world was quiet, yet full of subtle life, the whisper of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft hum of night insects. He walked to the gate, looking back once. The house stood still, unassuming, yet somehow transformed, as if it carried its own secret within its walls. Niran understood that life would go on. But the memory of this night, the weight of the silent promise, would remain, etched in his heart forever. He stepped beyond the gate. And for the first time, he felt the air lighter, freer. The past and its shadows were behind him. Yet the lesson lingered. Promises, silent or spoken, shape destinies in ways we cannot always see. Niran walked into the night, the soft hum of the earth beneath his feet guiding him home. And somewhere, beyond the shadows and silence, the promise rested, fulfilled. Dash dash dash.